In a small village nestled among rolling sand dunes lived a man named Abdul Rahim. He was a kind soul, but fortune had not been his friend. His pockets were often empty, and his stomach rumbled more than it was full. Yet his heart was rich with compassion. One scorching afternoon, Abdul Rahim was at the bustling village market. His eyes, usually scanning for a piece of bread or a handful of dates he could afford, fell upon a sight that tugged at his heart. There, tied to a post, stood a she-camel. She was a sorrowful creature, painfully thin, her ribs like a washboard under her dusty hide. Her head hung low and her eyes were clouded with despair. The other traders mocked her owner. "Who would buy such a bag of bones?" they jeered. "She's one step away from the vultures." The owner, frustrated and eager to be rid of the animal, offered her for a pittance. Abdul Rahim watched, his heart aching for the poor camel. He had only a few coins saved for his family's dinner. He looked at the coins in his palm, then back at the camel. A debate raged within him. His family needed to eat, but he couldn't bear to leave this creature to her fate. Making a decision that defied all logic, he walked over to the owner. "I will take her," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The owner scoffed but gladly took the meager coins. The other traders laughed aloud as Abdul Rahim led his new frail companion away from the market. They called him a fool, but Abdul Rahim didn't hear them. He was focused on the weak animal, whispering gentle words to her. He brought the camel, whom he named Barakah, meaning blessing, to his humble home. His wife, Fatima, looked at the weak creature and then at her husband's empty hands. She knew what he had done. Disappointment flickered in her eyes, but she saw the unwavering compassion in her husband's gaze and said nothing. That night, the family shared what little they had, and Abdul Rahim gave a portion of his own tiny meal to Barakah. He found the freshest patch of grass he could and brought her water in a small bucket, stroking her neck as she drank. He saw a flicker of life, a spark of gratitude in her weary eyes. From that day on, Abdul Rahim cared for Barakah as if she were a precious treasure. Every morning, he would lead her to find tender shoots of grass, often walking for miles under the hot sun. He cleaned her coat, tended to her sores, and spoke to her with a kindness she had never known. The children, following their father's example, would bring her water and pat her gently. Slowly, miraculously, a transformation began. Under Abdul Rahim's devoted care, Barakah started to regain her strength. Her coat began to shine, her eyes cleared, and she started to fill out. The skeletal frame was gradually covered with healthy flesh. She would nuzzle Abdul Rahim affectionately and follow him like a loyal dog. The villagers who had once mocked him now watched in silent astonishment. The bag of bones was becoming a strong, healthy camel. Then, one morning, something truly wonderful happened. Abdul Rahim went to milk Barakah, not expecting much. To his amazement, the bucket filled to the brim with rich, creamy milk. And then it overflowed. He filled another bucket and another. It was more milk than 10 of the best camels in the village could produce in a day. Fatima and the children stared in disbelief. They had milk to drink, milk to make cheese and yogurt, and plenty left over. Abdul Rahim shared the miraculous bounty with his neighbors, the very same people who had laughed at him. His generosity, like the camel's milk, seemed to have no end. Soon, word of the miraculous camel spread far and wide. People came from distant villages to see the camel that produced an endless supply of milk. They saw the healthy animal and the humble, kind man who cared for her. Many offered Abdul Rahim vast sums of money for Barakah, but he always refused with a gentle smile. "She is not for sale," he would say. "She is a member of our family. She is a blessing from above." A few months later, another surprise awaited them. Barakah gave birth to a beautiful and strong calf, a perfect miniature of her now glowing mother. The family's blessings had doubled. With the milk and the new calf, Abdul Rahim's fortunes had completely turned. He was no longer the poorest man in the village. He was able to provide for his family, help his neighbors, and live a comfortable life. He built a bigger home and a proper shelter for Baraka and her calf. Yet, he never changed. He remained the same humble, kind-hearted man. He never forgot the day he spent his last few coins on a creature everyone else had given up on. He knew his good fortune was not just luck. It was a reward for his act of pure, selfless compassion. The story of Abdul Rahim and Baraka became a legend in the region, a tale told to children and grandchildren. It was a story about how a single act of kindness, an investment of the heart rather than the mind, can return blessings 1,000 times over. It teaches us that true wealth isn't measured in coins, but in the compassion we show to all living beings. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales that inspire.
In the heart of the vast, unforgiving Arabian desert, where the sun beats down with relentless fury and the golden dunes stretch endlessly to the horizon, lived a Bedouin man named Abdul Rahim. He was known throughout the tribes for his wisdom, his resilience, and his deep connection to the desert he called home. But more than anything, he was known for his extraordinary bond with a she-camel named Fatima. Fatima was no ordinary camel. Her coat was the color of pale moonlight, and her eyes held a depth that seemed to reflect the ancient secrets of the sands. Abdul Rahim had raised her from a calf. After finding her alone and near death, her mother lost to a sudden sandstorm. He nursed her back to health with camel's milk and gentle hands, and from that day on, an unbreakable link was forged between man and beast. To Abdul Rahim, Fatima was more than just a mode of transport or a source of milk. She was his companion, his confidant, and his guide. He spoke to her not in commands, but in soft whispers, and she seemed to understand his every word, his every mood. She could sense a shift in the wind long before he could, and she could find hidden wells of water with an instinct that bordered on the magical. One scorching summer, a great drought fell upon the land, the oases dried up, the sparse vegetation withered, and the desert became a furnace. The people of Abdul Rahim's tribe grew weak with thirst and hunger, their herds thinned, and despair began to settle in their hearts like the suffocating desert dust. The elders gathered, their faces etched with worry. They decided to send their most skilled trackers in search of new pastures and water, but one by one, they returned defeated and empty-handed. Finally, Abdul Rahim stepped forward. "I will go," he said. His voice calm but firm. "Fatima and I will find water. We will not return until we have saved our people." Some scoffed at his confidence, while others looked on with a glimmer of hope. They knew of his bond with the she-camel, a bond that transcended the ordinary. So, with a small pouch of dates and a water skin barely a quarter full, Abdul Rahim mounted Fatima, and together they disappeared into the shimmering haze of the horizon. For days they journeyed deeper into the desert than Abdul Rahim had ever gone before. The sun was a merciless enemy, and the landscape was a monotonous panorama of sand and sky. The dates were gone, and the water skin was empty. Abdul Rahim's lips were cracked, and his body ached with fatigue. He would often slump over Fatima's neck, his strength failing him. But Fatima never faltered. She walked with a steady, determined pace, her long legs eating up the miles. Whenever Abdul Rahim felt he could go on no longer, she would nudge him gently with her head, a low, encouraging rumble vibrating through her chest. It was as if she was lending him her own strength, her own indomitable will to survive. On the seventh day, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, Fatima suddenly stopped. She lifted her head, her nostrils flaring as she tasted the air. A deep, resonant call echoed from her throat, a sound Abdul Rahim had never heard before. She then turned sharply to the east and began to walk with a renewed sense of purpose. Abdul Rahim, weakened and delirious, trusted her completely. He clung to her back as she navigated through a maze of towering rock formations he had never seen. The air grew cooler here, sheltered from the open desert. Fatima led him into a narrow canyon, its walls carved by ancient winds, and then he saw, tucked away in a hidden alcove, shielded by a cluster of date palms, was a spring, water clear and cool. bubbled up from the earth, forming a small, life-giving pool. It was a sight so beautiful, so miraculous, that Abdul Rahim thought he must be dreaming. He slid off Fatima's back and stumbled towards the water, falling to his knees and drinking deeply. It was the sweetest water he had ever tasted. He looked back at Fatima. She was drinking too, her long neck bent gracefully towards the pool. When she had quenched her thirst, she looked at him, her dark eyes seeming to say, "I told you we would find it." Abdul Rahim filled his water skin and rested under the shade of the palms, letting his body recover. He knew they had found more than just a spring. They had found a new home, a sanctuary for their tribe. But their journey was not over. He had to get back and lead his people to this paradise. The journey back was just as arduous, but this time they were fueled by hope. When they finally crested the dune overlooking their camp, Abdul Rahim saw the despair that had taken hold. The people were listless, their tents offering little comfort. He let out a loud cry, and all eyes turned to him. They saw his full water skin, and a murmur of disbelief rippled through the camp. He dismounted and walked to the tribal elder, handing him the skin. The elder drank, and his eyes widened in astonishment. "Well," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Abdul Rahim pointed back the way he had come. "Follow Fatima," he said simply. "She will lead you." There was no more scoffing, no more doubt. The tribe packed their belongings with a speed born of desperation and hope. They formed a long caravan, and at its head, walking with a proud and steady gait, was Fatima with Abdul Rahim by her side. She led them through the same path, through the rock formations and into the hidden canyon. When the people saw the spring and the date palms, a great cheer erupted, a sound of pure joy and relief that echoed off the canyon walls. They had been saved. The tribe established a new settlement by the spring, and life began to flourish again. Abdul Rahim became a legend, but he always deferred the credit. "It was not I," he would say, stroking Fatima's soft neck. "It was Fatima. She's the true hero. She's the soul of the desert." And so the story of Abdul Rahim and the she-camel Fatima was told for generations, a timeless tale of loyalty, courage, and the profound, unspoken connection between a man and an animal. It became a reminder that in the harshest of places, the greatest strength is not found in power or might, but in trust, in companionship, and in the quiet wisdom of the heart. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the desert. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from around the world. We'll see you in the next video.
In the vast, unforgiving desert, where the sun beats down without mercy and the sands stretch endlessly, lived a man named Abdul Rahim. He was as poor as the land was barren, with only a small, tattered tent to his name and a heart heavy with the struggles of daily life. Every day was a battle for survival, a search for a few drops of water or a morsel of food. The desert had taken much from him, leaving his spirit as dry as the cracked earth beneath his feet. One scorching afternoon, as Abdul Rahim was trudging back to his tent, his shoulders slumped with the weight of another fruitless day, he saw a sight that stopped him in his tracks. A camel, its magnificent form now frail and weak, lay half buried in the sand. Its eyes were clouded with pain, and its breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. A deep, ugly wound festered on its leg, a clear sign that its journey was nearing a painful end. Others had passed by, seeing only a dying animal, another casualty of the harsh desert. But Abdul Rahim saw something more. He saw a fellow creature in immense suffering. Forgetting his own hunger and thirst, a wave of compassion washed over him. He hurried to the camel's side, his heart aching at the sight of its misery. He gently cleared the sand away from his body and tore a strip of cloth from his own worn garment. He then took his most prized possession, the small waterskin that held the very last of his water, and carefully cleaned the camel's wound. He poured some of the precious liquid into his cut hands and offered it to the camel, who drank weakly but gratefully. Day after day, Abdul Rahim tended to the camel. He shared his meager food, gave it all his water, and spoke to it in soft, comforting tones. He named it Rafiq, which means friend. He foraged for desert herbs to create a poultice for the wound, applying it with gentle hands. His own resources dwindled, and his hunger grew sharper, but seeing the life slowly return to Rafiq's eyes filled him with a strength he had and felt in years. The people from the nearby oasis scoffed at him. "You fool," they said, "wasting your water on a dying beast. You will perish alongside it." But Abdul Rahim paid them no mind. His connection with Rafiq was a silent promise, an act of pure, selfless kindness. Then, one morning, something miraculous happened. As Abdul Rahim applied fresh herbs to Rafiq's leg, which was now beginning to heal, a tiny green sprout pushed its way through the sand right where he knelt. He stared in disbelief. The next day, more sprouts appeared, and the day after, a small spring of clear, cool water bubbled up from the very spot where Rafiq had lain near death. The desert, which had only ever taken, was now giving back. Word of the miracle spread like wildfire. The same people who had mocked Abdul Rahim now came to witness the impossible. A lush, green oasis blooming in the middle of the barren wasteland. The spring grew into a small lake, and palm trees and fruit-bearing plants began to flourish around it. The oasis became a beacon of life, attracting travelers and birds, transforming the landscape. Abdul Rahim, no longer poor, became the guardian of this new paradise. He built a well for all to use and shared the fruits of the land freely. He knew that this abundance was not his alone, but a gift born from a simple act of mercy toward a suffering creature. His life, and the very desert around him, had been forever changed by the power of kindness. He and Rafiq lived out their days together, a constant reminder that even in the harshest of places, compassion can make the desert bloom.